heavyweight champion, welcome, Danny Batten. Fucking number one. You win.
Hey guys, I'm Cy and welcome to A.C.E Podcast Nation, the home of the Danny Batten Fight Show, and this is episode number 80. And tonight we're going to be talking to our guest, as well as looking at an action-packed few days as we've had the Cage Warriors Trilogy, UFC Vegas, and more. Plus, we'll have a little look at the news, as well as getting some predictions from our guest about the Conor McGregor's fight, which is the next UFC card coming up. For the boxing fans, I'm afraid it's going to be a lot of MMA this week, but next week we're going to be boxing heavy. I'm hoping to have a boxer on, so we like to mix it up as best we can, go with the flow and go with the shows, as it were. But the show's available live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. A.C.E Podcast Nation, of course, you're home to many great shows and series featuring top guests, expert analysts, and more. So please do give us a follow on social media. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Click the bell for notifications. That is the most effective way to support the channel and the most direct way at the moment. And you can find links to everything in the description below. But joining me as ever is, of course, my co-host, former Cage Warriors champion and UK MMA legend, Mr. Daniel Batten. How are you, sir?
Yeah, I say. Doing all good. And as usual, UFC giving us a good treat, but we won't say too much because we don't want to spoil anything for our Lee Doski on the other side there.
That's it, mate. That's it. We don't want to spoil it, but it's been there's so much MMA to watch, mate. Like I haven't even touched the Bellator card. I just didn't have time. And that by all accounts, that sounds as if that was quite a good one. But Cage Warriors again put on a phenomenal trilogy, and UFC was good from last night as well. So it's always entertaining. But as Danny just mentioned, tonight's guest is a true legend of the UK MMA scene, a pioneer, if you will. It is Mr. Lee Doski. How are you, Lee?
Oh, thanks, guys. Yeah, good. And I really appreciate you not telling me what happened, because this is actually Sunday night is my UFC night. I usually sit down on the sofa, I get the kids away, and I get that big telly all to myself. And if any of you so much as accidentally tell me what happened, I'm just throw my glass of wine on the floor and just storm off. And don't mention what happened.
Yeah, there is nothing more frustrating now, I would just say. And then, like, I always seem to get a notification on a Sunday morning for the big shows, and it'll say like, oh, Conor McGregor lost or won or whatever, and it's just, you still watch it, but it just takes the edge off it when you know the results and stuff. Just not the same, unfortunately, but there we go. But so Lee, we're going to have a chat to you for a little bit, and if anyone's got any questions in the live chat, we'll throw them at you as well, mate. But what I'd like to do really is go back to the start and kind of ask you how you got into combat sports and MMA, and the age, what sort of age you were, because obviously you fought some of the biggest names in the game, certainly from a UK scene point of view. So we got lots to talk about, but where did it start for you?
I don't know. That's because I'm so old now. As I said, the Alzheimer's kicked in. I can't remember. I think it was late 90s, early millennia. Danny's former coach Lee Asdale did bring it all to the shores, as we know, and he had a few of those amateur events. I was one of those faces on those early amateur events, and in no time at all, it kind of progressed into the Andy Jardine era, where I met Danny. Danny was at the time considerably skinnier than me. I think he's 2 kilos heavier than me now. He was his neck is actually bigger than my whole head now. His neck, but I remember when he had a skinny neck and a skinny body underneath it, and that's where I met him. And that was in the Millennium Brawl era. Danny knows what I'm talking about.
Oh my God, yeah. That was the days when everyone was still smoking in the venues.
That's a long time ago, right? Isn't it?
Yeah.
A long time ago. Was there like a particular reason why you sort of went into like combat sports and that sort of thing? Was it something you were interested in before you started training?
I just think, like everyone, if you get some kind of psychologist on them, they've got some kind of repressed resentment towards other human beings, and they just don't like paying court fines. So that's where they always migrate towards combat sports, I think. But yeah, you know what? I think I'm now a man in my mid-40s, and I'm already looking back at myself in a slightly, as I always call it, human stock car racing. I've said it before. It's like, why on earth do you do that to your body? And why do these youngsters want to expose themselves to unnecessary trauma? And it just seemed like such a brilliant idea at the time, just to fight in between recovering from injuries. As soon as you're not injured, you want to fight again. And it's madness. It's a glorified form of self-harm, I think.
Yeah, it's like Demolition Derby, you know. It's like, I always say, like, if your job is to get punched in the face every day just while you're training, you've got to have a certain mentality and certain amount of dedication just to be able to do it and get up. And when you wake up on a Monday morning and you're tired like everyone else, but you're also aching and you've got a black eye or whatever and you've got swelling on your face, like, Danny, that's hard, isn't it? To have that dedication, to just do that day in, day out, and keep doing it through those, those aches, those pains, those injuries, those niggling injuries as well, which kind of won't go away.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not easy. It's hard on the body, and it can be hard on the mind too. This is something that gets overlooked. It ain't easy being an MMA. You've got to try to improve so many different areas of your game. So you're doing your wrestling aspects, your grappling aspects, your striking aspects, but that mental part, that can be torture too. I mean, having limps and sores, you can kind of get around them. But sometimes when the old mind gets a bit weak, that's the hardest hurdle to overcome. It's not easy because we can be affected by things in our personal life, which I've seen, with my students over the years, also experienced it myself. There's a lot of difficulties to overcome to try to make a success of a career. And even more so, I'd say today, with the climate of how good people are and the accessibility of so many top coaches and gyms.
Yeah.
Do you know, so like Lee, like particularly when you're younger, if you have got stuff going on in your personal life or whatever, and you're a bit frustrated, a bit pissed off or whatever, surely I would imagine like doing sort of combat sports training is a good way to kind of get that stress out as well.
I definitely, and I relate to a lot of these modern athletes. You are so driven, it's beyond talking about. There is a motivation burning inside your stomach, and we didn't even have the UFC or being a millionaire to drive us, but all the combat athletes even of that era, still they have that same thing in common, which is that there is this reason that you can't quite put your finger on it, that you want to be a better version of yourself and you want to go out and express the finest version of yourself. You're constantly refining and searching for it, and every time you make some kind of confirmation in the gym that that's my missing jigsaw piece, now I want to go out and test this puzzle, and it's just an addictive lifestyle that it's very hard to walk away from.
100%. So when you like in those early days and stuff, who were you like your influences in terms of, I suppose, who helped you on a day-to-day basis, whether it's with training and things like that, but also who are you looking up to from a fighter point of view?
I mean, again, these are things that over the time I've had odd podcasts and spoke about this, and Danny's name has come up in it, that we never really had like a structure, a generation of mentors that had sailed the sea before us. We were very much our own sat nav. We were working this out by trial and error, and we were all mentoring each other, and that's how I got to kind of know Danny. I seen him on a show, suddenly realized he had a kind of a similar, well, he was living a similar lifestyle to me, and I would think nothing of traveling around the country just to be around the headspace of people that are looking at the same thing from a slightly different perspective. And we both said it, there wasn't, black belts were not the most accessible of people, and that level of information you would go out of your way to go and find that, or be around someone that had accumulated those experiences that you're seeking to get. And there weren't too many of us around, so we went from gym to gym from time to time, and major allies like that, I suppose.
Yeah. Danny, you've talked about that sort of thing as well before, like with just learning from people who have got certain levels of experience or who have been there, how important that is. And I know that's something that you encourage your students to do, is to go and train at other gyms, learn from other coaches, other teams. Like, how difficult was that back in the day?
Yeah, I was fairly lucky because I got in very early with Lee Asdal, that was kind of considered a well-rounded guy. He could grapple. He was known for his striking. I think wrestling was always a little bit of a hole for many, many years, even going over decades, I think, in the UK. Not such a big issue these days. But he was pretty well-rounded. And this is what I think gave me the edge. Back when we were starting out, Lee talks about starting out in the late 1990s and early 2000, there was the lightest weight division of 70 kilos. I was walking around at 64. So I was given a lot of weight. So me being able to be more considerably well-rounded was a massive influence on getting results up against these heavier guys that had even more holes in their games than just lacking wrestling. I was a pretty decent striker with pretty decent grappling off my back, and that served me well for many years. But we evolved to a really good level that would be relevant today as those years rolled on, because better coaches did come over. The black belts were becoming more accessible as the times went on, and good times did come eventually. But yeah, we used to have to travel around, and me and Lee have quite a bit of history of training together during one part. I think I cornered you for 3 or 4 fights.
You did, mate.
Maybe we're training together heavily, doing lots of sparring, heavy sparring. Was not always a pleasurable being on the receiving end of his southpaw boxing. I remember Lee having very, very good hands. And the good thing about Lee's game at the time was he had a bit of a judo background, I believe.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a straightforward affair to try and get him down to avoid this awkward boxing style that he had. And he's quite a tall guy. I think you're about 6'1", aren't you? Something like that,
Well,
6'1".
I've shrunk since then, mate. I'm just 5'11",
Right.
3/4, but I was.
Right. Yeah. Really difficult guy. But, he posed many, many problems for me in my training, and we bounced off each other and got different things out of each other. And I really enjoyed doing the corner. One of the good things about Lee was his ability to adjust to what you was wanting from him. He really did try. So he always had utmost respect to whoever was in his corner, whoever was influenced his coaching at the time. One thing I will say, which to me is a little sad, but I think Lee could have been so much more than he was. And he's so much better than his fight record suggested. Lee was one of these guys who would fight you on days' notice, and no matter what your level and what your size as well. This is something that, it's very rare that you would get that these days. But people were a different fighting breed back then, and not to say we're all humans, of course, and we haven't changed in that sense. But the climate was a different climate. And, to be courageous and step in there and not turn down a fight was something that was just done more so back then than it is done today. And Lee was one of those such characters. And to put things in perspective here, many, many years I was fighting with no hand wraps at all. And the funny thing about Lee Doski was she would wear gaffer tape. This guy would actually gaffer tape.
Christ.
Cut me some
I'm like, what is the point? He would literally gaffer tape his knuckles up, and that would be his protection for his hands. It was unbelievable. And to try and reflect back on injuries, I think you had some bad injuries. Didn't you break your forearm once or twice in fights?
Yeah.
Blocking kicks with his forearm because he had this, like I say, southpaw boxing stance with a slightly elongated, stretched out lead arm to sort of like block the flak. But it works well against punches, but not so well against kicks. And I'm not too sure, was it one of the fights you had with Dan Hardy that broke your arm?
Yeah, Dan Hardy in 2005, Kenny Moyster in 2010 broke my other one.
Yeah, unbelievable. Yeah, broke his forearms. I mean, horrible thoughts of injuries. Not gone through anything like that myself, but this is the kind of personality and the kind of Lee Doski that I know that many don't know. A true warrior in every sense, and a real martial artist. It's just that kind of going back to what we said before, that it was so difficult to get access to the coaching, and there was zero management skills. Zero.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is where I think if you've got a Lee Doski today and we could, rewind the clock 20 years and have him in his youth today, he would have been one of the top fighters. I have absolutely no doubt about that.
Well, you go through your record, Lee, and you fought some of the biggest names in the UK MMA. You had a rivalry with Dan Hardy. I suppose you fought him twice. I was just looking there. Obviously, Danny mentioned in the second fight, it counts as a loss with Dan Hardy picking up the win, but it was actually because you broke your arm. But you won the first fight as well. With a rear naked choke. So that's obviously something. But you also had a bit of a rivalry with Paul Jenkins. You fought him a couple of times, Paul Daly. These are
Jez Loudon. He was
big names.
That guy, that Jez Loudon was a good fighter. I always remember of that era. He was probably one of the most well-rounded guys I've been with because back in the day, Paul Daly and Dan Hardy, even though they went on to be superstars, they weren't leg locking people. And playing alternative submission kind of finishes. They were what they were, but where's that Jez Loudon? You never knew what he was going to bring. He could bring a little bit like yourself, Danny. He had a well-rounded game everywhere.
Didn't he went on to UFC, I believe, though, didn't he?
As well,
he did, yeah. One of the very first ones.
Yeah.
I think was he French guy? I can't remember now.
Yeah, French.
French dude. Yeah, he was really very good.
Yeah, he spent a long time in London and stuff. But again, once he blew up with the UFC, kind of like a lot of people do, they get that we identify with their national heritage and they get an awful lot of support from their homeland. And he, I think he went back to Paris for a little while. I think someone said he's he makes films or something now. He's that guy.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. It's funny though because his record is phenomenal. And then he went to the UFC. He fought there 5 times. He won his first 2 fights, lost 3, and then kind of left there. But everywhere else, he's he was picking up sort of regular wins. He looks like he's got a sensational record, and all the stoppages, they're all different, like heel hooks, arm bars, ankle locks, triangle chokes.
Not Paul Jenkins, spinning back fist.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
that's no mean feat, is it? Do you know what I mean?
There were some good fighters in there, and a lot of them were, And again, I've learned so much from it. Where, coming back to what you were saying, it is because there wasn't a filter of management that Danny's now, with the success he's producing in his gym, he identifies these young lads with courage, and they will go out and they'll fight a UFC title tomorrow. If all he would need to do is take them off the lead, but a good manager would stop that happening. Wouldn't talk the person down. You've got to keep their confidence high, but you have to nurture that confidence and expose them to much more intelligent, regulated risks. And as he said, I didn't have that filter. I just had my self-respect. And unfortunately, when a promoter is able to talk to a fighter direct without that intermediate person, then you can tug on their pride very, very easily.
Yeah.
And it'd be no different to pushing into you in a nightclub when it's the same outcome. It's not hard to get a young man to want to fight. Someone prods him. Do you know what I mean? So simple to trigger me like that. That's the new concept there. I was triggered. That's what I was.
There we go.
Triggered by
don't start down that one.
From all these promoters.
We got a question in the live chat. Gaz says, who's the baddest dude from your era, Lee?
It's Danny Batten. Of course it is.
Yeah, give me some of that.
Only because I've heard of
build this man's ego.
Stories outside of it. Yeah. You know what? One thing I learned, and Danny Woodhoff, sharing the changing room with so many personalities and so many people that did go on to be like from that cage rage era, when we had even the likes of Vita Belfort and Anderson Silva were still in the changing rooms of our domestic fighters, that you get a totally different feel from a human being when you are in their personal space, breathing in the same oxygen in the same room. And certain people have a chemistry or have a persona on the microphone that they don't necessarily have in a room. And that being said, the other way round, some of these modest, polite, nice people like Danny on the microphone, you see them on fight night and you're around them and you just get a different depth to their intention. You don't always really pick up the magnitude of a person's intentions unless you're in a room with them. And there's an awful lot of them guys I've shared a changing room with, and I still remember, it's like I'm traumatized by it, the smell of Tiger Balm and the FUD, the frequency of a shin hitting into a pad before that person goes out, and I'm like 5 fights till I go on, and it releases that adrenaline. That is violent. That person is violent, and they're in a real headspace to be violent. And I'm going to be in 4 fight time, but I just don't feel it at the moment. I'm just relaxing. Yeah.
So, like, were you like a nervous guy before fights? Were you? So you said there, like you got a couple of fights waiting until you're on. Were you the kind of guy who's like pacing around and really amped up, or were you more chilled?
What I've come to accept, coming full circle with this, that with having had the accumulated the fights that I had, and even with the MMA stuff, like 34 fights, that you are a different person at different times throughout those experiences. And I remember, if I wasn't fighting regularly, overthinking everything too much, and really overcoming my own anxieties, building these pressures into my mind that weren't real, but I made them real. So there were certain fights I'm really proud of myself to just walk down there and climb in there, because the fight I had in the changing room with myself was a big fight. And then I went through phases where a little thing would click in my head, and I remember one year, I think on my record there, something I had like 8 fights or something in 1 year, and I just remember just not feeling an adrenaline dump. And then towards the end of my career, looking at everyone knotted up with nerves, and me looking at them all like, I think you're all just taking this a bit serious. It's just a fight. And then and not having enough adrenaline, and everything hurt more. So there is a sweet spot you got to find. You don't want to overcook your potatoes, but there is this special place you can find in a changing room where you're scared enough that it's not going to hurt when you get hit, but you're calm enough to be able to react in time and space accordingly, because you get that time dilation feeling if you're too nervous. Yeah,
I like it. How would you deal with the sort of that nervous energy then as well? Like, because you've got to control it, haven't you, but in the build up to fights. And I guess if you're in the main event, you've got to wait, for several fights before it's your time to go on. And also, do you have your walk-ons and stuff back when you guys were fighting still, or was that something they brought in later on? Like
what?
Like the walk-ins with music and stuff, because I've seen a few older fights like really early in the UK MMA scene, and they didn't really go down that route. It was kind of just walk in silence and stuff.
Yeah.
But
listen, right, Danny, right, while Danny was practicing how to win fights, I was practicing my walkouts.
That's what I would be doing.
I was a black belt in walkouts when he was like white belt at walking out.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I'd be doing. I'd be like a bit of Oasis on. I'd be, I'm going to walk in like this. I'm going to do that now. But when did you get your release then of that adrenaline? Is it the walk in and you hear the crowd and stuff like that? Or is it as the bell goes and the fight starts? When does the nerves and that nervous energy turn to adrenaline?
It's a science now, like performance coaching now with all these NLP practitioners, all these sports psychologists. They really do sit with these fighters now, and they do recognize they build a unique psychological blueprint of that person, and they know the process to go through to get them in the right headspace. But we didn't have that. We didn't have that, and I was literally only through accumulating so many fights. I kind of learned how to not do it, learned how to overcook it, and I just had an awful lot of experiences in there that I reflected on, and I do consider myself quite a good coach and quite an empathetic coach for naturally talented, aggressive, confident fighters. I can accommodate them, but I think I can get inside the head of people that have got self-doubt. They can empathize with the fact that I've overcome my own demons, and I think you just got to genuinely sometimes accept that you're scared. I always say it to my little kids. it's like you know, I learned a long time after that your external dialogue can program your internal dialogue, not the other way around, that your internal dialogue programs your external. And if you say to yourself out loud, I'm not scared of being scared, I'm not tired of being tired, because sometimes the fear was the exhaustion you was prepared to expose yourself to. Now, he was doing 5-5s long before most other people even could count to that many rounds. And when you know you're going to allow yourself to be that exhausted, give yourself personal consent. There is a fear, and anyone who doesn't think that they would feel it, all you need to do is you need to go on a running machine and handcuff yourself to a running machine, and then literally when you're knackered and you really want to be sick, put it on for another 2 minutes and feel what them other 2 minutes are. It's death, it's terror, it's cardio terrorism. That's what it is. And people don't realize how scared you can be because you're prepared to get that exhausted. So my own fears were through the fear of my own exhaustion, and that's why I did like he did, train so hard that I don't mind getting knocked out, I don't get beaten up, I don't want to lose the will to win because I've defeated myself through my own exhaustion. And that was what I was kind of proving to myself every time I got in there, that I'm not going to lose to my own exhaustion. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm not going to quit on myself. And that puts some pressure on you.
It's interesting. I find it fascinating because like Cade is in the chat on YouTube has just said, would Cy ever step into the cage? So like, look, I'm gutted that when I was like a teenager, MMA wasn't really a thing. Like I did when I was in my late teens, like 17, 18. I remember my mate showed me like UFC videos, which he had got from like a market somewhere where, you know, from America and stuff like this. But like, I'm gutted that it wasn't around when I was younger, because I would have loved to have done sort of training, just not for like any sort of reason other than just to do it as like a fitness thing. But I wouldn't be able to do it now because I walk with a walking stick and I got one bloody leg. But I'd have a go. If I could take my walking stick in with me and go in with Jake Paul, I'd probably do that. But apart from that, I'm not really interested in getting punched in the face at my age now. I'm 40 in a couple of months. Man, I'm not ready for that.
You're suffering from a condition called being sensible. That's a horrible to suffer from.
First time anybody's ever said that to me. Result. But like, one thing I did want to ask you, Lee, and I put this question to all the different coaches and the fighters and everyone, and Danny, I've put it to before as well, is so I got 2 teenagers and a 12-year-old, all boys, and I'd quite like them to get into sort of MMA and training and, you know, see if they enjoy it from a fitness and a self-defense point of view. And if they're any good, then they're any good, and it goes on from there. But for just generally, just for self-defense and that type of thing, my missus is kind of against it. She thinks that it would encourage them to fight, like outside of their training and stuff like that. And I wanted to get your opinion on how I can convince her that I'm right. But no, like really, I guess I'm just interested in it from a coaching point of view, how you would address, like if parents have got those sort of concerns and they bring kids to you or whatever, like what would you say to sort of alleviate that?
I'd say this. I would say, having taught a lot of kids and I'm proud to say, got a few of them to a reasonably good level, is that if the whole social narrative is sit down, shut up, stare at a screen, don't move, drink loads of unhealthy sugary based drinks, load your body up with loads of starch and glycogen, and then you're not allowed to actually do anything with it. Sit down in an overcrowded classroom, and if you call out too much, you suffer from ADHD because you can't concentrate. What you've got to do is you've got to put these people in a natural environment, a natural habitat that a human being should be in, where you're moving more than you're talking. And I just think it's so important to not let human being disassociate itself from what it is. It's like, I totally get that if I strangle a human being unconscious, or I will continually elbow someone from a position of advantage, that socially my life's going to shut down pretty quick. But that doesn't mean to say that through me doing that all the time, that's made me more of a violent person. Or in actual fact, I remember truly feeling at a point where Danny Batten was probably the only bloke who could armbar me in 2004. I genuinely feeling like I had more patience with the world. I had more patience with road ragers, people that were carrying internal tension. I remember feeling when I was fit and young in my prime that I don't need to bite to that stuff. I just felt that it would be unfair. So and that's quite a self-empowering feeling if you can get that. They try and sell this narrative, some of the traditional martial arts and some of the more unconfirmed bits of information. Listen, I'm teaching you how to be a weapon, and so what you don't ever want to use this in real life, because if you do, you're really going to hurt someone. But there is a real truth to that stuff when you're messing around with the methodologies that MMA athletes are, or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu athletes, or any functional martial art where there is an assessment of where you can do it through a competitive experience. Then those guys aren't asking that burning question, that self-doubt. Can I really do it? Am I a coward? Am I not a coward? It's like I found it a personal confirmation of myself, and that's what I know I've given to these kids, a personal confirmation, not bottle, but real confidence. And I've said it before, once bottle or courage transcends into confidence, then that is a different type of person at the other end of that. If you've got courage, you'll always be proving to everyone that you're prepared to have a fight. But if you can develop real confidence in a child, that they truly don't need to fight.
Yeah,
It's bigger than courage. And I think that's what martial arts a good quality martial arts instructor can truly give to the younger generation.
Absolutely agree.
100%.
Yeah.
I find it fascinating because even traditional sort of boxing enthusiasts who are sometimes against MMA, and they will, in the media and stuff, they will try and paint MMA as like brutal cage fighting, which has got no rules and this, that, and the other. And in actual fact, it's martial arts. It's karate and BJJ and it's a combination of all these different things, which traditionally are about discipline and self-defense. And like I remember, even I went to like 1 or 2 karate lessons back in my early teens, and they were so it was all about discipline. It was all about controlling yourself and this sort of thing. And I think that should be the focus rather than the violent side of it. At the end of the day, it's a sport, it's a competition, but 9.9 times out of 10, when that competition's ended, you could have a 5-round fight where 2 fighters have absolutely knocked 7 bells of shite out of each other. But as soon as that last bell goes to the 5th round, they will shake hands and have a hug. And you see it, Dan, even with some of the fights which we've seen over the last couple of years where there's been a proper bit of needle. When the fight's done, the fight's done. Like even Khabib and Conor McGregor, who genuinely hate each other, when that fight was done and Conor McGregor was humiliated, let's be honest, he was gracious in his defeat, in his words after the fight. They shook hands, they kind of bowed, they did all that. And I just think that should be the focus, not the things which people use to criticize and beat MMA around with it. Does that make sense?
Oh, well, it does make sense, but you're not going to assist yourself in selling that narrative to your missus, because if you say, listen, once my kids beat the living daylights out of everyone in their class, that's why we should let them do it. We won't hold grudges, but there will be carnage in the classroom. You're not going to sell it. As moving into the more mature years of my life, like Danny, I'm like in my later 40s now. God help me. When you hear these martial arts virtue words, when you talk about things like self-respect, mutual respect, self-discipline, with those big powerful words, it just bounced off me in between adrenaline dumps, that you sit and you reflect on these things in a really profound way, and you go, I've got them things, and actually they're the real gifts that I value, and they're the real gifts that I seek to pass on to the people that come into my club. And it's not, it isn't just like a club. We're practicing so much about back. We never around to learning how to hit one. It's not that. It's that these are intrinsically embedded into the methodology of what we're doing. By exposing yourself to those intense experiences, you have to have mutual respect. If you haven't got mutual respect, you haven't met a person that is capable of beating you. And if you haven't, you've either been protected or you're just in the wrong circle. So you have to be able to contemplate defeat like it's very possible that it could happen, because that is what mutual respect is. That I'm standing in front of someone that can hurt me, but my self-respect is what keeps me standing here, because I believe that I can do exactly the same to you. And that my self-discipline is that no matter how angry I feel, if I don't use my composure and pick my moment, and I'm not going to be able to do this job. So self-discipline is a profound life skill that you definitely need in fighting. And obviously you need to hold your life together when you're an angry bloke who can spin in back fist traffic wardens, and you go, I'll use my self-discipline, I won't do that, because that is going to really increase my road fine. So self-discipline, and that's what we're teaching these youngsters.
Yeah, 100%. And funny enough, Rob has just sent in a couple of questions, which I've got to know. And like, we've got a group of regular viewers who watch the channel and watch the football shows specifically, but the last couple of these shows they've joined us, and they openly say they're not 100% familiar with MMA, so they're asking various questions which maybe you wouldn't get thrown at you normally, because you'd normally be getting questions from hardcore MMA fans or whatever. But a couple of questions from Rob. He said, at what age did you realize you wanted to beat people up for a living, and what sparked it?
Yeah, I never wanted to beat people up. I just, going through the traditional martial arts, as a lot of these youngsters did, I had a profound question dangling over me. Does this shit really work? Is an awful lot of people.
Absolutely.
And certain people go, do you know what? I don't want to open that Pandora's box. I'd rather just listen to what my plastic black belt is giving me, which is that my instructor says it does, and I'm happy to just put the lid on it right there. Others are like, I'm not too sure about this. I need to confirm it for myself. So it's nothing more than a process of confirmation. That's all it is. It's not about beating anyone up. It's just about confirming and being as honest with yourself as you can possibly be. That's all it's been for me.
That's interesting, mate. I find that really interesting, because it sounds like there was a lot of kind of I can't think of the word now, which is going to bug me. It'll come to me in a minute. But like intrigue almost from you, whereby you wanted to really just see what this was all about, almost, rather than it being, I want to train to be the baddest dude in the room and be able to do whatever I feel like doing. It was more an intrigue about the martial arts and the training, and like you said, what does it work? And the other question he said, Rob did, he said, maybe a childish question, but when you first started and you were highly trained, did you walk down the street passing blokes thinking, I could choke you out, I could beat you up? Or was it, just like that? I suppose it's, did you really feel like that self-confidence, like you were the baddest man in the room?
It's such a horrible curse, because I actually think that now, and I've got a bad back, a sore shoulder, my cardio shit, and I still think I can take them all. And I wouldn't even win a medal in my own club now. These youngsters, I got like 104 and 93 kilo flipping purple belts, brown belts, and black belts whose cardio goes at 200 beats a minute. And and I'm just getting reminded that if your heart rate can't stay at 200 beats a minute for 25 minutes, then look to the floor when that guy stares at you in the bar. I'm just not good at doing it. I'm practicing looking to the floor. I'm practicing this more covert body language, like, please don't hurt me, I've got a bad back. It's going to be a long drawn out learning experience.
Funny enough, Danny, that's one of the things which I do notice a lot on social media from people maybe who don't watch a lot of MMA, is they kind of make it out, or they give the impression that you don't have to be very fit, because they're short rounds, it's just 3 rounds of 5 minutes, or 5 rounds of 5 minutes in the main event. But like, talk to me a bit about how fit you have to be to be able to go constantly, whether it's grappling, striking, wrestling, whatever it may be, for 5 minutes solid, and then do it all over again. Like, obviously, Danny, you coaching people of all abilities. Like, how fit are these guys and boys and girls and people?
Yeah, they're probably a lot fitter than what we was back in the day when we was doing it, because everything's got so much more scientific, especially with weight cutting as well, which is another thing that sort of like become more important as time went on. But I think the ultimate thing with the fitness is to understand, to steer the fitness in the right direction of what you're doing, and that is for recovery. And so this is something that I worked on a lot, and I understood very, very early on. I got tired, obviously more than once in my fight career, but I got particularly tired where it was absolutely awful, where I was sick in between rounds. When I fought Neil McLeod, and I've made no doubts about it, it was the most horrendous experience. I pulled it off somehow, and I managed to beat the guy. But it was a guy that I generally would have had fear of facing again. The guy was just so fit. But yeah, it's the recovery what's important. So, like Lee was saying, when your heart rate's spiking up to 200 and above, which in moments it probably does, you got to be able to get it back down to recover again. And that's where the true fitness is in my mind. So another way of looking at this for people that really don't know what we're talking about, the problem with combat between two people is that if you can control the pace, that's all very well. But what about when someone's willing to run faster than you are and you're attached to them? That's the problem you have in the cage if you're not as fit. You could be better and more skillful, but when you're tired, you become unable to implement those skills that you have. So your brain's telling you one thing, your body's saying, no, I can't. Can you imagine being attached to someone that's running a marathon and you're tired after 2 miles and you've still got another 24 miles and this guy's still going at the pace she was going at in the first 2, but he's just wanting to run on and you're attached to them. That's what it's like being in the cage, in the ring, competing against someone that's fitter than you. It's so important to be fit, but specifically being fit in the way that you train your body to recover. So that recovery is not in between the rounds, although that's part of it, of course. It's in between what's happening in the rounds. So you do get these flurries where someone strikes, try and takes you down, you block, you defend, you may counter strike back, you sprawl, you push away and you reset. And the person that predominantly starts taking over and getting some kind of dominance in that fight, when the skill set's so close, the mindset's so close, it is going to be who can recover quicker. Because whoever recovers quicker is going to be on the job chasing you down the quickest thereafter. I nearly went to go and start saying about this happened last night in UFC, but I just stopped myself.
Yeah,
Otherwise I had Lee knocking at my door wanting to do some rounds. And to me that's what's important about the cardio. People think you just have to be fit. Well, what type of fitness? There is different types of fitness, and recovery is a massive part of it in the sport, in my mind, for MMA.
And to add to that, if you look at the and they can do it all now with heart rate monitors, you can replicate a sparring round. You can literally get on a heart rate monitor. You could, over a 5-minute period, you could look at what that looked like, that guy's cardio was for that round, and then you can go, right, let's go in the gym and let's recreate that cardio experience for you. Now, if you look at every 5-minute round as a cardio blueprint, right? And you've got sweet spots, because obviously there's only so much phosphorus, creatine in a muscle, there's only so much glycogen. And when someone hits their VO2 max and they start to move into their aerobic threshold, that they're going to only be oxygenating their body through the way that they're breathing. But if you look at, and I learned this from actually being in the corner on Cage Rage in the changing room with a guy that went on to be Melvin Manoff. I've just seen some bloke hitting some pads, and looking at how he organized his energy system, I'm thinking, I don't blow my adrenaline like that. I do not blow my creatine like that, like such surges of explosion. But you can have these sprints to that 5-minute line. You can have a sprint, find a static position, get a rest, or get so much fear out of your opponent that they run away, so you get your 3 breaths. always used to train with the narrative of, if I can take 3 breaths while nothing's happening, I'm not going to get more than 3 breaths. Anything more than that, I'm back in a fight. So I've either taken a guy down and I found a static position. We've got a clinch where we've neutralized striking up against the wall. I've got my 3 breaths. If you will find, if you're going to put your heart rate up, you need to find your sweet spots where you can take your 3 breaths.
Absolutely.
You need to take them at a point where the other person psychologically needs that they don't. You need to be working them when they need their 3 breaths, and you can break people psychologically by just coming up with a unique cardio blueprint of what they don't want, and you can.
Yeah.
You've got to put the pace on them at critical moments, and as cornermen, we can see it. And sometimes our guy's a little bit gassed, and we go, "I know you can put your heart rate up a little bit more, but I know this guy don't want to go there, and I know you don't, but you can. So you have to now." And you have to believe, and I say that combination needs to happen now. It has to happen now, because it's going to break him psychologically. And as an experienced coach like Danny, and I consider myself nearly as experienced, I find them. I have that intuition in them sweet spots, you know, where I need that work from people.
Amazing. I love the insight. I got to say, it's, I find it so fascinating. And like, obviously, we've talked to so many different fighters and coaches from different disciplines and different eras and current and former. And I just find it fascinating hearing people like you, Lee, like talking about, because everyone's got a slightly different take on everything, the way they view it, their reasons for doing it. And you can just learn so much. It's, I love it. I got to be honest. But, so Cade asked a question as well. He said, I guess for both of you as well, when you, as an MMA fighter, so when you were guys were like, you know, in your prime, would you get, if you were to say out for a couple of beers on a Friday night or a Saturday night or whatever in town, would you get guys trying it on and trying to pick a fight with you? Because you kind of do see that a lot, whereby fighters just get a bit hassled like that.
Well, I can come in on this.
And
I, having been around a whole load of fighters, that where I feel massively sorry for those type of people are for characters like Danny, who in the main, like he quite rightly says, at 64 kilos, you don't send out a message to the ignorant people in the community that you are an ass-kicking Duracell bunny, right? So as a result, as you start to move up the weight divisions, you start to have that deterrent. Hence, a lot of doormen would rather pack on a load of muscle and never be fighters, but they want the deterrent of that physicality. And I was just on the crest of that, because I was, you know, in my mid 80 kilos, I would cut down to 77. But if I'm not fighting, I'm going to be in my mid 80 kilos, and I'm 6 foot, and I'm not nowhere near big. That isn't big, but that doesn't look like a human being that can't fight. Whereas you could be massively, massively shocked having seen the guys in those smaller divisions. A guy like the Triple C or something like that. You can imagine just some of these bantamweights. And I've watched bantamweight professional boxers punch people in nightclubs, and it's such a devastating thing to see, because they're 8.5 stone. The guy truly doesn't even know what an 8.5 stone man can do when they, with the correct kinetic linking, to throw a shot into someone's jaw when they're slouched in an unathletic posture with their jaw relaxed. Yeah, I've seen that. So I never got too much of it, because I wasn't big, but I wasn't that small where you wouldn't think I couldn't fight. But I just feel sorry for all these drunks that have messed with all the featherweights and the bantamweights out there.
Yeah,
massively sorry for them.
Just thinking they're easy targets, don't they? And they're going to sort of showing off, mate. Ultimately, is they're kind of showing off to the people they're with, or whether women or whatever it may be. And it just, unfortunately, like you say, feel sorry for those fighters who've got to deal with that, but also kind of feel sorry for the people who think they're going to try it on with this, you know, like a featherweight or a flyweight. It's those flyweights, mate, is the ones you want to stay away from, because they're all tiny, but there's some killer flyweights around the world.
They don't get tired. They just buzz around you all night and then drink your beer. That'd be horrible. I mean,
drink your beer and take your women.
Call all over your kebab. And you try and swat them. You just don't want to be around.
Yeah.
Spot on. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? So what I want to do, Lee, just before we finish, is something which I call the one-word game, because Danny still hasn't thought up a proper name for it. So we'll go with the one-word game. I blame Danny. So basically, I'm just going to give you a list of fighters or personalities from the world of combat sports. You just got to say the first thing that comes to mind. Might be an insult, might be a description, might be a funny story, whatever it may be. So, one-word game with Lee Doski. First name, Paddy the Baddie Pimblett.
Baddie.
Jake and Logan Paul.
Brit.
Tyson Fury.
I'll just say Tyson. It's just.
Nah.
He's a big boy. Anthony Joshua.
Humble.
There we go. And then the final one, Conor McGregor.
Not so humble.
Yeah.
Humble, 2 words.
Not so humble, I think. Sums it up nicely, doesn't it? And then the last thing I just wanted to do with you, Lee, before we let you go, is on the 11th of July, so a couple of weeks, we have a massive UFC card. So I'm going to pick out a couple of those fights. And I'd just like you to give me a prediction. Danny will give his prediction as well. And who you think is going to take those fights. But first and foremost, one of my favourite fighters to watch, Sean O'Malley is fighting Luis Smolka. Danny, who you got on that one, mate?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Mally.
Yeah, see, I love watching him fight. What about you, Lee?
Yeah, I am as well, yeah.
And then we've got a very interesting heavyweight fight. Tai Tuivasa is fighting Greg Hardy, everyone's favourite fighter. Danny, who's going to win that, mate? Because that can go anywhere for me.
That's difficult. I'm going to go with Tai. I'm going to go with Tai on this one, but I wouldn't be surprised. It's a really, really hard one to pick, but I'm going to go Tai.
I'm going to go Hardy.
Greg Hardy, those heavyweights, mate. Like so much
Yeah,
power.
you just can't tell.
Yeah, I would like Tai Tuivasa to win. I like him. Greg Hardy, I'm not so much of a fan for obvious reasons, which we don't need to get into. But generally, men who hit women, not a fan. So I hope Tai Tuivasa teaches him a little bit of a lesson. And then we got the co-main event: Gilbert Burns versus Stephen Thompson is the first one. Who you got, Dan?
Stephen Thompson. I think he can control the range. Gilbert Burns, for my money, he suffers with his cardio. He's quite an explosive type character. Can definitely do some damage, but I don't think he's going to be able to get in range enough because Stephen Thompson's so good at range management. I just think he's just too wise, too experienced, and will push it into the latter rounds and become more effective. I just think he'll slowly pick him apart.
Right, listen, the greatest human being on the planet is Stephen Thompson. I am, as far as human beings go, I love him. I love everything he does, right?
Big fan.
And I think for Gil, and I love how elegant his footwork is. And I did come from that karate background, and I always recognised the elegance of being light on your toes, and I love that style. But Gilbert Burns, being the explosive guy he is, knowing what he's getting into, if he's going to win, he could blitz himself into a clinch. And if he can clinch him and he can get him down, it could happen. Gilbert Burns could really win that because he will throw in reckless blitzes. There is, I mean, Jesus, man, they are both weapons, and I love Thompson. Actually, I want Thompson just to be the champ forever. That's all I want. I want him, but I think Gilbert Burns might just blitz him at some point. I think you're right. Thompson will step up in most of the time, but I think he'll blitz him into a clinch, and I've got a funny feeling that he might just maul him to death when he gets in there. I'm only saying that just for just as an alternative to Danny's answer.
I think Gilbert Burns will get that one. And then the main event of the evening, it is the third fight in the trilogy. They stand at 1-1. It's Dustin Poirier versus Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor says that he is the most focused he's ever been. Danny, where will we see the return?
I mean,
of the winning?
I love both these guys to bits, and I'm hoping Conor McGregor's done what he needs to do to change it up to become what he was, and some, to actually come back and beat Poirier. I've got to go McGregor.
Do you know, I love that, and I think exactly like you. If you watch that second fight, he was in it and he was landing them shots. And I love both of them guys for so many different reasons. But I love it. But I don't think that for Conor McGregor to change it up where he doesn't leave his foot, he doesn't put his weight on his front leg anymore, it wouldn't be Conor McGregor. It just wouldn't be him. And I'm feeling like that is a blueprint. That calf kick, I don't know how he's going to be able to in such a short period of time, even though he knows that calf kick's coming. That style he has got is made for a calf kick. It's not made for really anything else. And I'm so excited, and I think the UFC needs him to win. They actually need him to win because he does bring a star quality. Poirier is the fighting man's fighter. There's no doubt about it. Anyone who respects fighting for what it is, grassroots, loves that. And you go, he's the real deal. But the UFC need Conor McGregor to win this. They need that super mega star because he is now he's the standard in which all these champions are compared to. I think that he might not fold that calf kick again the second time. I don't think he will. And
while we're talking about tactics on that, I think the adjustments he needs to make to go back to what he was and more was, if you look at the first fight that Poirier and McGregor had, McGregor was coming in with a lead heel kick to the head. He was using that lead leg. To me, if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. It's going to become a target. But if you're using that lead leg, it's going to be much harder to attack. And also something that we saw with McGregor in previous fights was he actually used his teep really well. He'd use his teep, get you backing up, and then he would land his deep left cross hand, which was always so accurate and powerful. I think if he looks back at what gave him the win before and look at what gave him the loss before, and I agree with Lee, to me, McGregor was winning much of their second contest until those leg kicks become so consequential it suddenly knocks him out of the running. I think if he can see that and see what was successful and see what was not successful, and he can put that into a new linkage for the third time around, I think he can do it. But Poirier's very experienced, very, very smart, and full well he'll have a plan different from the previous two times to add into the mix as well. I think it's going to be an absolute banger. And I sit very, very same as Lee. I want Conor McGregor to stay in the loop. He can still be relevant for another 2, possibly 3 years if he stays focused and stays on it. And I think he's done nothing but amplify the attention of the sport in a positive way, love him or hate him. He's increased the fight purses of many, many fighters. I love this dude to bits. I really, really do. And also hats off to his coach that I've had. When I say run-ins, I've competed against him before. Great guy, and John Kavanagh. Brilliant man. Oh,
yes. John Kavanagh is not just a phenomenal coach, but he seems like a phenomenal human being as well. I completely concur with that. I would love to get him on for one of these shows. I got to be honest, that is a definite long-term target one day. Because you'd love to pick his brain, wouldn't you? Like the same way we've picked Lee's brain tonight. Like he's one of those guys who's just probably got some stories. I think Conor McGregor's going to win, if anyone cares about my opinion, but they don't. Conor McGregor will win. I think he'll knock him out in the first couple of rounds because I think he realizes that the UFC needs him to win as well. So I'd imagine that he's been training for that. But we'll see, I guess. Right, Lee, thank you for your time, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure. Really enjoyed it. It's been good crack.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. It was good. Good to chat to you.
Yeah, Lee, I've really, really enjoyed it. We've obviously been very, very close in the past, and whenever we see each other at fight shows, we always take time out to speak to each other. But to speak like this has been absolutely amazing. And we always invite people to come back on again, but it's a real must-have to have you on again. It's been an
Definitely,
absolute
mate.
pleasure.
Brilliant. I'll have to
100%.
do that. Good. All right,
Yeah,
guys.
great
Right.
stuff, Lee. Enjoy
Good,
your
man.
evening.
Oh,
Enjoy
Lee,
UFC.
what was it?
I
Lee,
will
what
do.
was
I'll
it
see
you
later.
wanted to plug? What did you want to plug?
Oh,
Tell me.
yes. Come on. I just wanted to let everyone know that Carlton Gracie Norfolk is expanding from the 19th of July, providing Boris don't cock us all up with some more game. We don't need to start with all this. But yeah, if that goes through, we're expanding out. We're expanding out into the Norwich region, and we're also expanding up towards the Wisbech area as well. So hook me up. Carlton Gracie Norfolk, Lee Doski, Tsunami Gym Norfolk. We are reinventing the wheel when these restrictions disappear on the 19th of July.
Amazing. Amazing.
Brilliant.
Phenomenal. Good stuff.
Good, guys.
Cheers, Lee. And me and
Thanks,
Danny
Lee.
are now going to talk some Cage Warriors and some UFC from last night. Oh, I removed the wrong person then. So don't leave us too late, too quickly, because me and Danny are going to hang around for another half hour or so. But just before we go on to the Cage Warriors and the UFC, Reese sent in a couple of questions earlier, which I want to go back to and put to you to explain. Just bear with me a sec. So here we go. Right, Reese wanted to know, mate, what's the difference between Cage Warriors and the UFC in terms of where they are?
Well, if you're talking about the competitors, the UFC is just the cream of the crop. Cage Warriors is like a precursor. It's just that one notch down. But when we say that, I think anybody in the top sort of like 3 to 5 in each of the weight divisions in Cage Warriors could all be relevant in the prelims. So that's sort of a way of looking at it. It's almost like when you used to have back along when I was competing, we'd done amateur, semi-pro, and pro. It's almost like the difference between going semi-pro and pro. It's everything that pro is, just without the solidarity of experience. But as a promotion, obviously UFC is just the most professional run event. Until you experience it as a coach and as a fighter, you don't quite realize what goes on behind the scenes and how big and how well organized, how huge the setup and how many people are involved in making it run smooth. And trust me, it runs very, very, very smooth. It's really an incredible experience. Obviously, you get none of that in Cage Warriors, but as a visual show, they look very, very similar. But what goes on behind the scenes is hugely different.
Sweet, cool, mate. Yeah, basically, UFC is the biggest MMA company in the world. Cage Warriors is the biggest one in Europe, and a lot of the top fighters in Cage Warriors make the jump to UFC soon after. Which is why at the moment Cage Warriors is in a transition at the moment of trying to build some new fighters, because they've just lost all their champions to the UFC in various forms.
Right.
So yeah, I suppose that takes us nicely on to Jake Hadley, mate. Obviously been on the show before. Was Cage Warriors flyweight champion, unbeaten. He's also the EFC flyweight champion. Now going on the UFC's Contender Series,
Right.
which is going to be a very interesting thing. And I think actually with how confident he is almost perfect for that series, isn't he?
Yeah, no, it's great for him. I mean, he's achieved so much. It's going to be great to see, what he's capable of, because we've not seen the full potential yet. It's going to be a great thing. Really is. I'm excited for him.
Yeah, it's really interesting how because everywhere he's gone, he has dominated. So it'll be interesting to see when he goes there if he dominates in the same way. I kind of expect him to, but you do just never know, because there's been certain fighters recently who've gone over from the UFC to the UFC from the UK who haven't done as well as I thought they might. And one of those actually is fought last night. Jai Herbert fought was it on the prelims or was it on the main card?
No, I think it's on the main card.
It was the first or second fight, wasn't it? What did you think of that fight and how it went? Because Jai Herbert is a phenomenal fighter. It was the first fight. He fought Renato Moicano, and I did say last week that Moicano is no mug. It was a very
No, he's
difficult
not.
fight for him.
Yeah.
But Moicano picked up the victory via a rear naked choke in the second round. But what did you think of Jai's performance overall going in? Obviously,
I mean,
he was looking to get started, wasn't he, really?
Yeah. Unfortunately, Renato just found the ways to beat him very, very early on. Normally there's a feel-out process and you have to try to figure someone out. And sometimes you just stumble across the weakness in their game that night. You just stumble across it by chance, and then you can keep poking there and keep getting results. Renato did exactly that, it seemed. For Jai Harbett, it was disappointing for him, and I was kind of disappointed about his performance. I really was. Jai Harbett's just so super sharp with his striking. If he only added in the super sharpness to his footwork, along with those sharp hands, and learned to throw sharp hands on the move a little bit, either coming forward and retracting off to left hand side and sticking some angles, he would have avoided that engagement on the wrestling and got him so deep in trouble. Also, his scramble up, he's using a lot of hooks to scramble up, and indeed that could be good because it elevates the hip of the person trying to control you. But the only issue with using hooks guard to try to scramble up is that as you kick your leg up straight, to stop you standing up from being kicked up and levitating the hips, you just hold the back of the knee, and it makes it a difficult proposition to try and get back to your feet. It was a disappointing night for him. He's got this incredible sharp striking style. I just feel like he just doesn't quite have he doesn't quite have the footwork knowledge and the ring craft to amplify that to a certain level in MMA to avoid what other fighters may or may not want. In this case, it was the wrestling range. I think if he can just start adding some of the anti-wrestling aspect, rather than like try to dig an under the pummel or settling for an over wrap where he's giving away his hips like he gave away his hips in the wrestling range against Renato. I just think it'd be great for him to be punching with angles a little bit more. But I feel like what gives him his sharpness and his speed with his hands is having static base, because he does have some ping and pang on those hands of his. He absolutely does. But he just couldn't get them going. Such a shame for him. But look, back to the drawing board. He's with a good team. Hopefully they'll be able to make the adjustments and he'll have another dig and we put on a great performance and we'll still see him in UFC. But he's definitely got to pick it up for the next performance, whoever he may or may not have.
Yeah, and I mentioned just now about some of the fighters who've dominated in the Cage Warriors in Britain and Europe, and then they've gone over recently to the UFC and haven't quite hit the ground running. And I know, I think his debut was scheduled for the UFC London card, which got cancelled because of COVID. I think it would have been very different for him making his debut in London, in front of a packed out house of British fans, to being out there. But you've got to adapt, I guess. He's certainly got the talent, and I believe that eventually he'll get it right. But he's under pressure now, as is Modestus and a few others. They are under pressure because of the way things have panned out and the results and fights that have happened. So they've got to change it up a little bit.
They have.
So we may as well carry on with the UFC, I guess, see as we're there. And we had Tim Means versus Nicholas Darby, which went to a decision with Means picking up the victory 29-28 across the board. What do you think of this one, mate? Very briefly. Yeah,
I really enjoyed this fight. Nicholas, he come to bang. He come in with some really big flurries, a little off balance at times, a little bit shallow with his footwork. When I say shallow, I don't mean like feet too close together. So he's too elongated, which made his base a little bit shallow, which I think made him throw these strikes become a little bit overcommitted. But Tim was great. Clinched up really, really well. He was performing good throughout the whole night. It really was. There was just one real big hiccup. He got hit really hard across the bridge of the nose, and it looked like things could suddenly be turned around. But Tim is an experienced guy now. He's no slouch anymore. And not going to make easy mistakes. He kept it together. He really, really did. But great performance for him. I feel for my money at the moment with both of them where they're at. They're going to come up. They're going to come up short against some of the other people in the division. I never saw anything that overexcited me about their game. And they're both very, very good fighters, don't get me wrong, but it ain't good enough anymore to be just a good fighter. You're just going to be nothing more than someone's stepping stone. And it worries me that both of them sitting at that level. It's not to say they can't improve their game, because both of their performances were pretty good. But yeah, it does worry me that if any of them step up any much higher than the ranking position that they're at now, they're going to struggle.
Yep, I think that's fair, mate. Just very quickly, we had a couple of questions for you, mate. So I wanted to get these in quickly. We'll go back then to questions at the end. Rob Boyle says, Danny, as someone who's relatively inexperienced to MMA, who would you recommend I watch videos of to get the cage fighting bug?
Oh,
I would say get a subscription to UFC Fight Pass for, I think it's $5.99. That is the best money I spend every month, because they've literally got every UFC event ever, every Cage Warriors event ever. If you want to look at British fighters and Cage Warriors, I would say you can watch Conor McGregor's early fights in Cage Warriors. You can watch Paddy the Baddy Pimblett, who's so entertaining. Also been on the show a couple of times, but he is like a funny, confident Scouse lad, but he is one hell of a fighter. And watching him make his debut in Cage Warriors, what was it, like 18? To where he is now, getting ready for his UFC debut, is quite an experience. And any UFC fight with Conor McGregor's, even his early fights in the UFC, there's such an event. From his entrances, he had Sinead O'Connor do his entrance at one point. I think that was for the Island show when he fought in Dublin. Like, you can't not enjoy that. And then at that point, he was putting on incredible performances in the cage as well.
But I know it's a difficult, because it's quite a broad sort of question. It's and how does he mean? Does he want to just watch some fights? I mean, obviously doing UFC Fight Pass is a great way of watching fights, because you can got such a big library of things.
Can you, instead of
but the site that I always go on, which is for free, is MMA Share. You can just jump on there and just see some of the latest fights if you just want to have a little look and see what's something that takes your fancy. But a little bit more than that, even just going on YouTube and trying to watch some short documentaries. There's short documentaries on there. Watch anything on GSP, because I think he's a great advocate of MMA who's still true to the roots of martial arts. I think he's a great guy to follow and get an attitude off of. I love GSP's perspective and outlook of MMA as a practitioner, and also sits well as a fan as well. I think he'll be great for anyone to look at, and I think someone would get a real good idea of what MMA should be in its purest form. Difficult, broad question, but if you've got the time, and certainly if you've got money to invest into it, because you do have to subscribe. So I don't know whether someone that's got no knowledge of something would happily suddenly subscribe. I mean, for us, it's a little different, of course. But like I say, that MMA Share is great. And even YouTube's got loads of MMA content that you can go on to, just to put your feelers out and educate yourself a little bit more.
Spot on, mate. And Donna said, were you anywhere? She said, were you good at any other sports growing up?
I've always been steered towards being active physically. Even something as simple as, if you want to think of it as a sport, is certainly a skill. I used to enjoy playing darts at home. I used to play darts for sometimes days on end, nights on end with my brother. So I really enjoyed that. I mean, I've never done it at any competitive level. I did play a bit of football. Even played for Royal Mail at one point, although football was never really my love. It wasn't my passion, but always being quite athletic and being quick. That was something that I dabbled with, but I really got onto the martial arts, and I did numerous martial arts and competed at quite many of them at a decent level. I competed a lot at Taekwondo. I competed in Thai boxing, traditional or sports jiu-jitsu, BJJ jiu-jitsu. I've done no-gi, grappling. I've done all sorts, but I was always quite athletic, and always had the frame of mind as well, the personality to compete. I'm so competitive. I'll turn anything into a competition, and I want to bloody win. That's just me through and through. It absolutely is. Even to a point, again, whether you want to class this as a sport, there's different sports. There's sport of skill and there's sports of physicality and physicality and skill. And something else that I really was quite good at was chess. I think it's been mentioned before. I was a little bit of a child prodigy at one point, and as a young teenager, I was playing for adult senior teams for Somerset team, West of England even. That's a fantastic sport, and to think that it ain't physical on our level, trust me, chess is. When you're in a tournament and your time clock's running out and you're under pressure, your heart rate is going some. And I've actually known, being in tournaments, of people being taken off to hospital for some of the older competitors having heart attacks in the room. It comes with its dangers as well, even pushing pieces around a chessboard.
Me and you need to play some online chess, mate, 100%, because my brother used to play chess for Wales, so I used to play a little bit when I was younger, but I enjoy it. So I used to play when I was drunk all the time. When I used to get back from like nightclubs and stuff, we used to play it a lot.
It's a great game, it really is.
But we'll come back to any questions towards the end. But the next step was the Andre Fili fought Daniel Pineda, no contest to an accidental eye poke. So frustrating this is, because we've seen a lot of these recently, or not a lot. But,
such a shame. And Philly was looking so good, so good. Was getting his leg targeted, and it would have been so interesting to see how that fight would have progressed. It seems Philly was doing all the things that were hugely consequential. Knocked him dizzy with punches, and I felt like let Pineda off the hook somewhat. I really think Philly could have put him away if he had just pressed forward, but he didn't. He come off the gas pedal, and no, it's kind of baffled by that. But Pineda kept targeting that leg, and I think that could have become an issue, say in the third round. But this unfortunate eye poke robbed us of knowing what was going to happen. So although Philly on the scorecard was absolutely winning and could put the fight away at any time with the body kick as well that he scored. It was also brutal. Pineda was hitting Philly in a way that we've seen it time and time again with those leg kicks and shin kicks, that once that goes, there's no coming back from it. You're permanently hampered. And it was, could he push Philly's lead leg into deficit that much that it got to that point? But we'll never know. So for me, Philly looked amazing. Pineda was throwing his hands a little blind, almost looking a little bit desperate. And I think that opened him up to Philly's sharp shooting style strikes, which was why he's catching to the body. He's really swinging with the overhands, which opens up the ribs and the body for those body kicks. And also swinging, it can make your other arm that is not going out to strike go a little bit wayward in terms of defending, which is why he got kicked in the head. He was just falling apart with his fundamentals as he moved forward, just putting too much into it. Whereas Philly was more, although explosive, was much more precise, much more clinical with his mechanical outlet as he threw his strikes. Really, really impressed with him. I don't know whether they'll run back this fight again. Could well happen, but Pineda would have to come with a different game plan.
Definitely, bro, mate. I thought he was he was struggling a little bit, but the body kicks, mate, the body kicks were the ones which did the damage for me. Really horrible stuff. But and then we had Timur Valiev defeated Rayone Barcelios by a majority decision, 28-28, 29-28, 29-28. This one was close. They had it. The one judge had it as a draw, but I had it to Valiev 2 rounds to 1 for what it's worth.
It was close, but Valiev was outworking Barcelos. But Barcelos was really impressing me as well, though. He's the way he come forward was really, really good with his stance, with his guard, and his takedown defense was absolutely incredible on a level that probably I don't understand, because there were times when I thought he was going down, and I could see that he was doing things, but I've seen other fighters do the same things, it seemed, and still got taken down, but he was able to avoid it. Really, really incredible takedown defense. And even at one point when he was getting taken over, he turned it into a front roll and got back to his feet that way. Very, very creative. So he impressed me defensively, but defense don't win if you're not attacking. And he just couldn't get enough attacks off of his own. He did have his moments, I think, in the second round, which was the round that I think he won, where he knocked Viliev down. But the confusing thing for me is when fighters hurt other fighters on the feet, they shoot in and they take it to a different realm. It's just bizarre to me. I think he should draw him back up and started to strike him again and be aggressive, because he's the problem for Barcelos was that Viliev's footwork was really, really good, as well, along with his volumes of striking, his creativity of striking. And that was his problem. And when he's rocked him like that, getting back to the feet, because trust me, he's going to be a whole lot more immobile because he's been rocked, and he would have started planting some of those aggressive strikes. And because he was so reserved anyway, he would have had the energy to keep the pressure on and have more success in that second round in a way where he could have actually pushed it to a finish, I felt. So Barcelos would have finished that fight, I think, feeling really, really frustrated, because it wasn't like he burnt up loads of energy. He just couldn't get his attacks off because of the footwork, because of the creativity of Viliev. Viliev was really, really impressive, but so was Barcelos. But Barcelos has got to think about how to get proactive with these guys who might bring that strategy. And for my mind, Barcelos needs to learn to both blend his attacks coming forward with a switching of stances. Because when you switch your stance in MMA, you start to cut off the cage more quick. So as an example, if you've got a left leg forward, right leg back, and you come forward and you step your right leg, you weren't going to squeeze them out to your left side, in which case you could start launching what would have been your lead leg as a left leg would become your rear, and then you could start kicking around and so on, and kicking them on the squeeze. So you squeeze them out to a left or to the right of you, and because you're switching your stance, you're reloading the opposite side. I think if he had some creativity in his striking in that way, along with his really good fundamentals that he had with his striking, I think he would have had more striking successes. But because he was so fermented with his left leg forward, right leg back, and stayed so strict to form, therefore you stay as a strict formed shape, which is easy to keep throwing things at and target at. But when you're switching your stance every now and then as you come forward, it would have made him a harder object to hit, and he would have also had a lot more to hit with. And then we would have seen a very different fight. So, maybe his team will try to put those wrongs right, and we might see a different version of him next time around against someone like Viliev's style. But what a great strategy for Viliev. Incredible athlete, and we're going to see more good things from him. I have no doubt about it.
Interesting, mate. Good analysis, that, mate. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. So I think, was it Tanabosa versus Ovin St. Preux's next? Were you a little bit surprised to see this go down the way it did, with Tanabosa winning via KO and strikes?
Tanabosa, he was impressive.
Impressive, mate.
Yeah, he did. I know he likes to fight in the pocket. He's not scared to trade. I know he comes in hard, but he was just coming in with really good decisions. And OSP was a little disappointing. He was waiting on the trigger. He was just soaking it up. And as he was soaking up this punishment, he started to look more and more tentative. And he should have just let things go. When someone's being really aggressive to you, sometimes the best form of the sense is to be aggressive back, not necessarily at the same time so you're trading, but to move forward with your own attacking game. And this can give you some respite from the pressure. But he allowed Tanabosa to keep putting the pressure, and it wasn't pressure in terms of big combinations. It's just that whatever Tanabosa was throwing with full commitment, really hard leg kicks, really hard body kicks, really hard hand punches. It was really looking good. Then OSP started to switch it up a little bit, which is great. He's an experienced individual now in the UFC. He switched it up and managed to get the takedown. The first few attempts of the takedown clinch were a little poor, and indeed even the one that he got him down with, he was leaving his feet behind as he entered forward and made it very obvious what he was wanting. But nevertheless, he did get moments where he's on the ground. I started to think, well, okay, look, he's going to change things up now. He knows Tanabosa's not so well equipped off his back. This is how we're going to win this fight. But Tanabosa managed to scramble up. Now, there's a little bit of controversy here about it being a fence grab. It's actually really hard to see whether it was a hugely consequential fence grab. He certainly reached up with what it looked like a grab, but it also looked like a fist. Really, really hard to know whether that's a complete grab. We'd have to see whether there's any other video angles.
I just looking at it, he did grab the fence.
It was a grab. Yeah, in which case, it was really down to the ref to reset them to the ground.
He should have, because he pulled himself up on the cage quite blatantly.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Naughty.
That is a bit naughty, but that's for the ref to obviously pick up upon and react in the right way. It's a little, therefore, unfortunate for OSP. But it did seem that OSP knew what to do to win, started to suss that much up, and we kind of got robbed of knowing what was going to happen thereafter. But up until that point, Tanaposa was really impressing me. Really, really was. But seeing that there was a little hole in his game, being on his back, he needs to address that. But he won. He looked aggressive with the strikes, and ultimately that's what got him the win, albeit from a crafty fence grab.
Yes,
well done,
Tanaposa. A little bit naughty, but it is what it is, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah.
So then next up was, bear with me because I've got to flick through a million tabs. Because the main event, Cyril Gane, ranked number 3 versus ranked number 5, Alexander Volkov, unanimous decision with Gane pretty much dominating, mate, wasn't it?
He did, and surprisingly so. I had Volkov down to win. I know you had Gane. I thought Volkov was going to control the range. And when I last saw Gane, although his performance has always been good, he was doing stuff off his lead side only. So much so, I started to think, is he well-roundedly equipped or not?
Okay.
Well, in answer to my question, if he wasn't, he is now, because we saw some great striking from him. And I think Volkov was struggling with trying to dominate that range because Gane was just faster. He's so explosive with his outlet of hands and outlet of kicks, just so explosive. It stopped Volkov being able to implement that height that he's got. And Volkov looked, largely lost. He was always in it. I thought because it was over 5 rounds that Volkov would start to establish the range. Gane, because of his explosivity, would start to fade. And in championship rounds, Volkov would come on strong and either stop Gane or, get 3 rounds up in rounds 3, 4, and 5. That's how I sort of envisaged it to go. But Gane was absolutely exemplary in his strategical striking. He had great cardio about him, which is something that I was still feeling was a question in his game. And I thought that he might fade. He did not. He did not fade. And if anything, Volkov was getting more lost and was beginning to fade. I was utterly impressed by him. I really, really was. And the fact that he was choosing to shoot at times, not even to get the takedown necessarily, although I do think they was committed for the result of a takedown. He wasn't too bothered whether he was going to get a takedown or not. He was just giving Volkov even more to think about on top of the flamboyant, explosive striking combinations from Gane. A very, very seasoned, very, very mature performance from Gane. And I'm happy for him. I was a fan before, but even more of a fan now after what I've seen. But I still love Volkov to bits. He's certainly not out of the running to come back stronger from this experience. He's not a stupid dude. And being 6'7" and packing on the sort of size that he's got, he's a difficult adversary for anyone. He's still absolutely in the mix. But Gane, for my money now, has proved that he's something special.
Yeah, that was, I feel like that was his coming out performance, I got to say. I really did think that was him saying, I'm amongst the best in this division. I want, I deserve mine. And it was super impressive. Volkov is a very, very good fighter. So for him to be dominated in that way, I thought was impressive from Cyril Gane. Other than stopping him, I didn't feel like he could have done anything more to kind of announce himself as being a top contender. He was already ranked 3, but just, that just gave something a bit special, something different. Yeah, it was an enjoyable card, mate. But I want to, we're coming up on time, but I do want to talk about Cage Warriors because Cage Warriors is interesting because, oops, I didn't mean to click that, and it's been on there. So Cage Warriors Trilogy, 3 nights of the best European fighters going at it. Rather than going like round by round, mate, if you just kind of tell me some of the people who impressed you. So we'll start on the Thursday. I I thought Sam Creasy versus Aaron Abbey,
Yeah.
two fighters who I really highly rate. I thought Sam Creasy looked the real deal. I got to say,
Yeah.
It was one of
I mean,
I thought that was one
yeah,
of his best performances to date.
it was a great performance from Sam, and so my situation with the whole trilogy thing, I got to watch that fight and I got to watch the Luke Shanks fight. The rest of it, unfortunately, I was teaching classes, and then I don't get on to the very early hours of the morning or late early hours of the morning. I just haven't had time to catch up on any of the fights. So, but to get back on point with Sam Creasy has a great outward flowing game. My criticism is that I'd like to see his guard a little tighter at times, but he did have his guard in place. But it's those times when he might not get his hands up that I think have robbed him from being a title holder in the past. There was times when he's been winning fights, and then he's got himself knocked out. And I remember him being at a club on my assistant coach arrangement, Paul, which I hate the term assistant coach because he's every bit of a coach that I am and more in my mind. The team wouldn't be what it is without him. But Raymond Paul did say to him when he was sparring and training, he goes, I would like to see your hands be up a little bit higher. And something that we've both been pushing him to have, because you never know when you might get the fight robbed from you. And all good blow me, that very fight that he was having, that he come to our place to help prepare for, was that one that he had his hands down, he got caught, and it led to the loss. So, but again, to retract back onto point of that fight, he did have his hands up at the right time. Yes, he does fight with his hands down, but that's just his style. I think it's too late in his career to correct that. So you've got to make what you got work, and he did that to great effect. He was floating between long, medium range and to clinch range very, very effectively. So because he has such a floaty, awkward foot style and awkward striking style in its entirety, that when someone tries to push close to try to smother that long medium range, he does a very, very good plum guard or single tie clinch guard with knees. And this does several things. It both helps you fight from the pocket because you're now clinching up, and it's also a great takedown defensive structure, because if they drop levels on you, you've got sensitivity through your forearm for that single plum guard hold, that single tie guard hold, and when someone's dropping levels on you. But because it's a forearm, there's quite a lot of height to slip the shoulder down to try to get underneath it, to try to enter in on the legs and the hips, which also makes him very, very hard to take down. And even if someone does enter in on him, trust me, Sam's a good wrestler. He's a great counter wrestler. He's a good aggressive wrestler. He's got a great sense of balance as well. Now, we did see his opponent get in under his hips and pick up on a single, and he just hopped around like it was normal nature to be up on one leg. It just didn't look like he was going. He was like Tigger bouncing on his tail. He's got an amazing sense of balance, this kid. Amazing sense of balance, and incredibly naturally, physically talented. And so he defended when he was in a position that could have been consequential. He was not going to be put on his back. He broke free from there and continued his dominance. Yeah, really, really impressed for him. It's going to be great seeing what happens when he fights his next fight. It's going to be amazing.
Do you think is he your pick to win that little tournament, the flyweight tournament, or do you think that's going to Luke?
Yeah, so we talk about this club. So I'm happy to sit back and watch this as a fan of both of them. Of course, I've trained them both a lot over the years, and I still do now, as and when they come our way. So they're both my friend. They're both students, and they're both great people as well. Very, very different personalities. Very, very different MMA stylists, which is going to make for a great fight. Anyone Luke Shanks fights is going to be a great fight, because he will throw down. He will throw down no matter who and what you are. If you're a good wrestler, he'll clinch up with you and mix it there if he has to. If you're a good grappler, he's not scared to be on the ground. He'll mix and trade there. A great striker, he's in your face and he'll be striking alongside you. That also can be the undoing of him. I don't think sometimes he strategizes as well as I know he could to help bring back those results more confidently. Sam, to me, is much more calculated type of fighter. I think Sam's naturally bigger, naturally stronger, naturally more athletic, but Luke is much more of a natural fighter. So to me, who will win that fight is who can impose whose style. Can Luke impose his scrappy style and really get in his face and put the grind on Sam and ruffle his feathers and not allow him to control that range and that pace? Or is Sam going to control that pace, pick at range? When he comes in, is he just going to walk in? Is Luke going to walk into Sam's single clinch guard with the knees? And in terms of wrestling, I think Sam's got the edge. In terms of grappling, I think Sam's also got the edge. I think he's bigger man, more athletic. But if Luke can ruffle him up, he will continue to ruffle him up and he'll start stealing the rounds off him. I'm just going to sit back and let the best man win.
It's going to be.
I think that's the best way.
Absolutely fascinating, mate.
It is a fascinating, mate, because they couldn't be any more different if they tried. Couldn't be any more different.
Yeah, I can't even pick because I like them both. I speak to Sam now and again over text, and obviously Luke's been on a couple of times on different shows and stuff, and I really like both of them. So I can't even predict who I think is going to win because I feel like I sort of
And I've seen them both spar each other so many times. They would train together so often.
You know who's going to win then?
Yeah, well, I know how each of them kept beating each other in rounds, and so it was never a clear-cut thing. I've seen Luke run away with it in rounds against Sam, and I've seen Sam equally run away with it with Luke.
Interesting. That's interesting, isn't it?
And so within our club, there's a real buzz of like, who the hell would win out of these two? We just don't know. So we've all agreed that it is a case of just letting them both play it out and watch and enjoy it. And they both got a lot of respect for each other. Luke Shanks, like I say, is a real fighter mentality through and through. We saw that with his fight with Hadley. You know, really just wants it so bad and can almost hate on his opponents. There'll be no such thing between these two. They're both going to want to win against each other. I don't think they care that they've previously rubbed shoulders with each other in the gym. I don't think that's a problem with them at all. No. I think they will both fight it out. They'll both give their all. It won't make them hold back on each other just because they've rubbed shoulders and got a little bit of a friendship going on between them. I think they'll both throw down technically and scrappingly. I think they'll both give it their absolute all, and whoever wins, I think they'll be congratulating each other and shaking each other's hand. There'll be no disrespect there whatsoever.
Good. That's what I like to hear, mate.
Who could hate on Sam Creasy anyway? Who could hate on him? Such a lovely guy.
Positive, nice guy, isn't he?
Gentleman through and through.
Okay. Look, there's so much to talk about with Cage Warriors. I thought Rory Evans, the Welshman on the prelims, was really impressive. Won with a ground and pound over Jimmy Fell. I thought Kaya Harvey, who submitted Manny Akpan via a triangle choke on the main event of the prelims on the first night, he looks the real deal. Really, really impressed by him. Sam Creasy was great. Liam Gittins is. Do you remember on the last Cage Warriors where he just went steaming forward?
And he got knocked. Yeah,
he did it again, but he just managed to
put it off. I'm happy for him.
Back. Yeah, really happy for him. But it was crazy to watch. Like, he just kept going forward.
Yeah, what weight was that actually? Because Gittins went up a weight, didn't he?
I think he did.
Because he looked tiny. He looked tiny last time. I'm just wondering whether he went back down a weight. Because he looked so small against the other guy last time out.
Yeah, I think I'll have to have a look. And obviously, we got to mention Matt Bonner, the new middleweight champion of Cage Warriors, won with a rear naked choke over Natajas Frederick. I'd recommend watching that one, Dan. That was a real good fight, actually.
Okay,
that was a good one. And then we had the Friday night. You had some phenomenal performances. None obviously started. Joe McColgan became the first Irishman since Conor McGregor to win a Cage Warriors title, becoming the new lightweight champion. He defeated Aj Sadari via a guillotine choke. What a guillotine, by the way, mate. It looks so nasty. Steve Amiable, obviously on the show pretty recently, won with a unanimous decision victory over Edward Wools. I saw some performance. I saw some highlights. He got rocked, didn't he, at one point? Yeah.
It looked like he buckled his leg as well as he went over. It looked really, really ugly, but he come back from it. But that looked like it was a great fight.
And then we had Luke Shanks, obviously, on the prelims. Very impressive, really good professional.
I
thought he didn't look, like he did pre Jake Hadley, like that dominant smothering style. but I thought it was a professional, good performance. And he's since said after the fight that he actually had food poisoning or a sickness bug or something like that.
Yeah,
so
do you know what?
To do that and not pull out of a fight is unbelievable, mate.
Luke's a funny one, you know. I've had him fight and represent us on 2 other occasions where he was throwing up everywhere. I sometimes wonder what he does with his weight cut, what kind of foods he's eating. It concerns me a little bit because this is really a frequent occurrence that he's always sick as a dog, but he always really performs well, even though literally he's had a sickness bug, puking before he goes in the cage. He goes in the cage, competes, comes back out, and he's throwing up again. Absolutely unbelievable. How you can compete like that, I never know.
Incredible.
But to know that he'd done it at this level and performed the way he did, it was really, really incredible. Great performance. And shout out to James Doolan, his coach, by the way, because he had 4 fighters fighting over that trilogy, and he come away with a clean sweep. Now that ain't easy. That is not easy. If that's not a commendment of not only the individuals for getting those wins in themselves, but for the team. And the team is ultimately structured by James Doolan. He's proven that throughout Great Britain, he's one of the top coaches that we've even got in Europe, and
100%,
up there amongst the ranks in the world. Really, really is. He's proved it completely.
And we had him on the show recently.
Yes, we did. Very fortunate to have him on.
And then on the Saturday, some phenomenal performances on this card. By the way, on the Saturday one, I haven't watched all of them, but Gerardo Fanny defeated Conor Hignett via a flying knee. Wow! Yes, indeed, mate. It was unbelievable. Scott Malone, really impressive. Defeated Atlas via TKO in round 2. That was a good performance. James Hendon submitted Paul McBain. Stevie McIntosh defeated Decky McLennan, who obviously we had on the show recently. I was really rooting for Decky, but he got choked out. It wasn't his day at the office. Same for Aaron Khalid as well. Got beaten on a decision on I think it was Thursday or Friday. Just wasn't himself, unfortunately. The main event was Ian Gary versus Jack Grant. Did not disappoint for the welterweight championship, and Jack Grant picked up the Ian Gary picked up the victory via a decision to win the welterweight title. That's another one, mate, which I'd advise watching. Real good. Yeah,
both real talents. But Ian Gary's looking incredible, isn't he? He's really something special.
Spot on, mate. Look, there's far too much MMA to go through every match and each match, so we've had to sort of spin it around and say some of the performances which have been really good. But there's some great fights this weekend, and we didn't even talk about Bellator, which I haven't seen yet, but apparently that's really good as well.
Right.
So it's going to be fascinating, mate, to see what we get in the next couple of weeks, because there's no UFC next week. So I'm looking to get a boxer on next week, I think, mate. We'll see how that pans out, because you never know how it's going to go. But I've got a couple in mind, so we're going to try and get a boxer on for us to have a chat to, and I'm sure there might be some boxing or some Bellator or something on next weekend as well. But Danny, as ever, thank you, mate. Thank you to all the people in the live chat, and of course, thank you to our guest, Lee Doski. Really appreciate everybody. Check out our merch pages, and also, most importantly, subscribe to YouTube, follow on whatever you listen to, watch, and just keep supporting us. Spread the word. But the A.C.E Podcast Nation and the Danny Batten Fight Show. But my friend, as ever, it is a pleasure. Slightly longer one tonight as well.
Yeah, but longer one, but for good reason, because we had a lot of fun, and it's been utterly enjoyable.
Spot on. Couldn't have said it better myself, mate. My throat, I could feel my voice going though. So it's going to be interesting. Donna was asking about where you can watch Cage Warriors. So Cage Warriors used to be on BT, but it's now on UFC Fight Pass. And I'm not even sure if it's on MMA Share, unfortunately.
I don't think it is. Yeah. Don't think it is on MMA Share.
Just have to dish out my UFC Fight Pass, log in to everyone so they can all watch. But no, guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for everything. We'll be back on Monday for the football show. Until then, we bid you a farewell. Nice one.
Defending champion, welcome